Welcome back to another episode of Let's Have Breakfast. I am your host, Jaden Eliz, and if you're new here, Let's Have Breakfast is a weekly podcast for 20-somethings and 30-somethings as we continue to age. Is meant to help you think about life differently and grow along the way. Housekeeping before we hop right into the episode. If you don't know a lot about me, I got my start on TikTok, which now is in question because of everything going on with TikTok and the legality and everything around that. And I am gradually continuing to expand onto other platforms, which is a task in itself because I have a lot going on. I am trying my best to pour into this podcast on a weekly basis, and sometimes I'm not able to show up, and that is really frustrating for me internally because this is something I love so much. Like, I love being on the podcast, I love talking, I love interacting with you guys about topics that you enjoy or topics you want to hear more about, guests that I should host. But since starting a full-time job, it has been really challenging to be consistent with. So not only do I have a full-time job outside of this, I just started my business, Curated Culture Media. So I'm really excited to kick that off, start consultations, and really start working with people on their social media presence and building personal brands and all of those kind of things that I'm working on. Curated Culture Media is a twofold brand. So essentially, I'm going to be helping creators and businesses build personal brands, help to understand themselves better, and really utilize that PR and communication background that I have, but also be offering services in resume building and, critiquing and helping with interview processes and stuff like that. As you can see, this is a podcast that I started from scratch. I learned all the skills from editing to now getting camera to record to what kind of microphone works best, what platform should I edit on, lots of trial and error. And that's something that I want to help people that are new to podcasting or people that just want an extra hand with their podcast with as well. So I am also doing podcast production. So what will come with that is essentially just like a guideline, a strategy on what your podcast should look like. So also helping with the scripting, making sure to provide feedback and talking about how it can be better on a weekly basis. Essentially just being a helping hand for your podcast. So that's also something I'm doing. If you are interested in starting a podcast, I do not have a website yet. It is one of those things that it's like, I'm going to start it and I'm going to figure things out along the way. I'm going to do it right, but I'm okay with a slow and gradual process as this is something that I'm doing on the side for right now. If you're interested in anything, please let me know. I do have an Instagram. It's at Curated Culture Media, and you will see it in my bio as well. So definitely tap in. Another thing I have for housekeeping, I know I'm going to be having her on soon, Autumn Black, but we are going to talk about the socialite circle a little bit more in depth. I know I've hinted at it a little bit for my Kansas City audience that we have a social group going on just to throw events and gather together, network, connect, and build community as content creators and influencers in Kansas City specifically, but in the Midwest, as we are often overlooked. We are a flyover state, and we're getting a lot of recognition now that Kansas City won back-to-back Super Bowls, and we're moving the baseball stadium downtown, and we have the World Cup coming. So the recognition is starting, but I would say on the creator side of things, it's slow and gradual. And but even when it comes to just like event opportunities, like Fabletics was just here and nobody was a Kansas City based influencer. And it's kind of like, okay, it's amazing that you took this brand trip, but like, it would have been really nice to see representation at like first ever women's sports specific stadium. It would have been really cool for them to invite people that live here. Whatever. That's my own gripe I have to deal with. But Autumn will be coming on soon, and we'll talk a little bit more about what the socialite circle is. But in the spirit of today's episode, I have already kind of gotten into what I've been up to, where I have not been balancing my life very well. And that is a huge portion of this episode. So today we are talking about things I wish I knew before I entered my 20s. I'm not super deep into my 20s. I'm still 24. I'm going to bask in that literally until I turn 25. But that's not to say I have not already gained my own experiences from the time I turned 20 to now being 24. Those feel miles apart. Like, I can't even comprehend that I was the same person. Well, I'm not the same person. I have grown so much. Like, that is not the same person anymore. And so even just thinking about how 4 years of growth can completely change your life is something that I really want to highlight. So let's dive into this episode. There are things that I feel like nobody told me about my 20s. Like, when you hear people, like when you're, 19, or you're like in your teenage years, your glory, when you're in your teenage years, you don't really think about what your 20s are going to be like. Like, I think we all kind of had this picture of like, oh, okay, like by this age, I'll have kids. By this age, I'll be married, or I'll move cities, or whatever you thought your life plan was going to be. It's like that you already realize it goes out the window by the time you're 21, because you're like, me have a baby in 2 years. Like, I'm not there yet. Some people are there, but it just, again, it's like a personal thing. Like, you don't realize really what you want until that brain is developing. Like, once, like, I really did feel a shift, even just from 23. Like, I look back at some of the things that were happening last year, and I'm like, oh, it was just a lack of maturity. It was a lack of brain development. Like, I just didn't fully understand how to handle this situation. And I don't want to say like everything magically changes the closer you get to 25 and once you turn 25, but I do feel like just this shift that I cannot explain happened, where it's just like, oh, I don't really care about that much, or I can live with that. Like, it's just this shift. Like, I really cannot explain it, but it happened to me, and now I just feel so much more sure of myself and like things that I'm doing. Like, it's like I'm not necessarily scared to take next steps because I'm confident that I'm making the right decision for myself. I know that's not the case for everyone, but that's specifically how my shift has felt. Like, as I'm entering this next year, like, I am 24 and a half. So I do just like feel the difference. And that's the thing. Growth is never going to stop happening. And I did not expect that, I guess. Like, as we're college age, we're going through the motions, we're growing kind of at a rapid rate, where it's like you just exited high school. Now you are expected to be an adult. Like, you have to figure out how to live on your own. You have to figure out all of these different entities really quickly to help yourself survive, like how to pay rent. Now I'm expected to pay my phone bill. Like, where am I going to come up with this money? Like, you really have to get a plan together and make it happen for yourself. And in that process, you're also learning things about yourself. Maybe you're learning your friendship style, or maybe you're realizing you have commitment issues, or just the small things that come with dating or really making new friends. You don't realize or recognize sometimes that you have trauma that you're carrying with you, or that you need to heal from something. And so as you're growing, you're like, okay, I've reached my peak. Like, this is it. Like, I don't see myself changing much more than this. And you do. Like, your growth is never going to stop. And once you get comfortable in that, it's really exciting. I think at first, when I first realized this, it's overwhelming, because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm always going to have to do the work. Like, there has to be a point in time where I don't have to do the work anymore. Like, it just happens. Like, I don't always have to work on this. And that's just not true. In order to be a good person, in order to be the person that you want to be and show up every day as a kind and considerate human being, like, you have to do the work. Like, you're not going to be perfect every day, but there are times where you're going to be challenged in the things that you thought you learned, and it's going to put you to the test to see if the work you've been doing is actually doing anything. And I think that's, like, for me, the moment when I was like, no, I'm good. And then I quickly realized, like, have situations happen where I'm like, oh, maybe I am still holding on to animosity from a friendship, or maybe I didn't completely heal from this thing that happened with my family. Like, triggers that you don't even recognize. So that's just what I mean. Like, your growth is never going to stop, and you just have to have comfort in that and be prepared for that, because you are going to always have to do the work. And that's just something I didn't realize as a teenager, or even as someone in my early 20s. Like, I thought it would stop at some point, but it's not going to. One of the hardest things I've realized is that you are not responsible for your friend's success. As a friend, you want to show up, you want to be there for them, but that's it. Like, that's the key to friendship. You are showing up for this person, and you are being the best friend you can be. So sometimes that looks like not giving unsolicited advice. It looks like even if they're making bad decisions, you're able to have conversations with them and be honest with them about what you think, but still being there to support them, even if they make decisions you don't agree with. I mean, like, obviously, there's exceptions to these rules. Like, if we're going out and doing, like, a major crime, like, maybe that could end a friendship. But if it's just, like, a lifestyle choice you don't necessarily agree with, or you just have a difference of opinion on something, like, that's okay. But I think a lot of times we want to be Spencer James, right? Like, we want to put the city on our back. We want to help every single person along the way. And you are going to hold yourself back if you are waiting to be successful based on how successful your friends are. It's just one of those situations where you're not bragging. Like, you're allowed to be successful in your own right. And your friends, their success, their time will happen for them as well. But you cannot spend time stressing over their lives when you have your own life to live. So the point is, don't burden yourself with the responsibility of making sure your friends are successful. That is up to themselves. You are there to support them. You are there to be a good friend. You are there to cry with them if they don't get the thing they want. But you are not responsible for how their life plays out. And sometimes you just have to take that step back and let them make decisions for themselves. The toughest pill I've had to swallow, I talked about this a little bit in the housekeeping, like just talking about what all is going on in my life right now. As a multifaceted person, you are never going to be able to do it all. Like, I can't even explain to you how long my to-do list is. Like, I have weekly, and I'm talking weekly to-do list. I have like 40 different things on there. It is unrealistic with everything I have going on to expect myself to be able to complete things every single week. I'm never going to be able to check that whole list off. And that's just the reality. And that's not to discredit drive or anything like that. But if you have so much going on, you can't give 100% to anything. And that's just, it's unfortunate because like I'm a multifaceted creator. Like I want to be doing a bunch of different things, but because you're doing a bunch of different things, you can't give 100% to every single thing you're working on. Maybe if you compartmentalize it, you can work on one thing, give it 100%. But even still in that moment, there's still something in the back of your mind that's like, okay, I'm thinking about what I can do for this project or how I can make this come to life. You're a busybody. You just have to understand that it's going to be frustrating for you when you can't show up for everything every time. There's solutions to that. Obviously, taking some things off your plate, but if you're not in a position to take things off your plate right now, you have to just understand that this is the reality of your situation and prioritize what is most important to you or what is most important according to the timeline and make it happen for yourself. But you just can't do it all, babe. There's always these YouTube videos that are like, how I do it all, how I make it all happen. But it's like, yes, maybe there is a day in the week that you are able to do everything. You go to the workout class, check everything off your list, you go to work, you make it all happen for yourself. But because you spent all of your energy making everything happen that day, you're not going to have energy for the rest of the week. Like, you just spent all your energy. And I feel, in my opinion, it's better to space out that energy and work on things as you can, as opposed to just doing it all and burning yourself out. Everyone works differently, but even then you're still not giving 100%. Like you gave 100% one day and now you're giving 2% these other days. Like you just have to space it out and you have to make it work for yourself as best as you can. I'm happy to do an episode on how to make a schedule and a process as multifaceted creatives because it's challenging and I don't always stick to it. I try my best, but life is life. Like it is meant to be fluid. Like dedicated people also need breaks too. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do a bunch of things. You just have to manage your expectation for how long you have to complete it and just prioritize things as best as you can. Similarly, being responsible is not just something that happens to you. Like there's people that have responsibility instilled in them from a young age. They're expected to really raise their brothers and sisters and be there for the family. But at that same time, like that's still a skill that had to be learned. So sometimes I think people look at, comparatively, if you look at 24-year-olds who are in multiple different positions. So like me, I'm currently working a full-time job. I'm starting a business. I'm on social media and trying to do content creation. I have a podcast. Like it feels like I have a lot going on. It feels like there's a lot of responsibility. You look at me from the outside looking in and you're like, okay, this girl has her shit together. Like, but this did not just happen. Like the responsibility I take and have does not just happen. There is nothing that makes me show up and do this every day. Like it's a responsibility that I instilled in myself to say, hey, I want to have a podcast. Here's what it takes to run a podcast. And here's the dedication I'm going to need from you, Jaden, to be able to make this happen on a weekly basis. And you can tell when I'm not being responsible and when I'm not showing up for my commitments, because if it is not consistent, there's something in that process where I was not responsible and it made the plan fall apart. Like there is a level of responsibility that you have to have that I personally think college teaches you. I am not the person to discredit secondary education at all. I loved college. I think I had a great experience. I could have had a better experience probably at another school too, but for what it was worth and to not have student loans, I feel like I had a relatively good education. At the same time, I don't feel like what I'm currently doing needs a degree to be able to do it. And I think that's why I'm not super interested in getting a master's, because I don't need it. Like genuinely working in advertising and marketing, it's so quickly evolving. Sorry for the angle change, besties. This is one of those hurdles that I was talking about when it comes to barriers to entry, when it comes to podcasting and just being a smaller creator in general. It's like there's always something. So my memory card just filled up, and so the video episode is not going to be as cute as I wanted it to be, but this is what happens. And I think those that have the ability to push through adversity, that's when success really happens for you. So I'm going to wrap this episode up. I know I was talking about having responsibility and knowing that it doesn't just happen to you. So that's a skill you have to work on. It's something you have to show up and you have to prove to yourself you can do it. It's really not about proving it to other people. It's showing yourself, hey, I committed to this. I can do it. Like I'm able to show up and make this happen. So I encourage you, if you're one of those people that kind of looks to others and sees and is like, why are they able to make these things happen for themselves? Why can't I do this for myself? And just know you're fully capable. You are able to do it for yourself. You just have to practice that skill and it will happen. But you do have to put some time and energy into making sure you're doing it. You're making it happen for yourself. So I know this episode kind of came to a quick end, but those are the thoughts that I have on my brain lately as far as being in my 20s and navigating it and feeling like, why didn't anyone tell me any of this information? And I just thought I would relay some of the thoughts that I've been having lately. So thank you for listening to another episode of Let's Have Breakfast. I am your host, Jaden Liz, and I appreciate you listening each and every time.